We asked Naz if she'd be interested in interviewing our CEO, Simon Allen. She said yes, and we were able to record their Zoom call. Please sit back and enjoy this insightful interview.
I guess just to kind of start off, I know that you've had a lot of experience in history with developing educational tools for students. And I was just curious, when you were a student, did you notice any issues with traditional education? And how has your personal experience shaped your goals for digital learning?
Oh, wow. Now that's good. That takes me back a little ways. Let me see now. I've been out of formal education in terms of university for about 35 odd years, give or take. So it goes back a ways. But I remember I'm a big fan of geography, Naz, and I did a business degree, but if I could go back and do it again, I would probably do a geography degree. Whenever I get the chance to go on vacation, I enjoy enormously going into the parts of the world where the geography is fascinating. So you go down to Patagonia, then you go up into the salt flats of Bolivia, you go high up in the Andes, then you cross the world and you go into New Zealand and you go up into the glaciers, and then you come back down to the extraordinary beaches just a few miles away, and you look at how the landscape is formed. As a student, I would have loved to have seen that and been able to really engage somehow with it, rather than just reading literally in a barely two-color book with zero supplements, zero engagement. You were lucky if you got referred to a BBC, physical documentary from 1963 or something. So to me, what I really love now, being in this business for so long, is the chance we have to bring so many of these subjects to life for students. And it therefore means it's a chance for them to figure out at a young age what they really love doing, what they really enjoy, and what motivates them. And if I were a geography student now, looking at geomorphology, looking at plate tectonics, it would be fascinating to see all of that, which I've now had the pleasure of seeing firsthand. But imagine getting that as a student earlier on, watching models of continents coming together, watching exactly what goes on in all these volcanic activities. That's a long answer, but I love the way we can bring complicated subjects to life by using all sorts of media and the best parts of technology.
Yeah, and I think, at least for me as a student, I find that I enjoy learning about things when I'm able to actually interact with the material.
Yeah, exactly. And our job is to make sure that we invest enough to look at those complicated areas and bring them to life.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm sure a lot of students will appreciate being able to do a lot more with their learning.
Yeah,
And
hopefully they will. And I do think they are. I think, we've recently looked at some of our net promoter scores, which include students and their satisfaction levels, and they seem to be growing, which is great. And we do have a really good response to Connect and all of our applications within Connect. So I think it is worthwhile.
yeah, and so I guess with the development of all these educational tools, and I think with this sudden switch from in-person to online classes, it's become clear that there's a need for equal access to these tools for students from all backgrounds. So how does McGraw Hill help meet this need for equitable education?
We need to really think about what we can give the teaching community and the instructors in higher ed, where they're worried about what students have access to. How can we provide the material in ways that is either accessible through the institution if the individual cannot afford it? How do we work that way? That's going to be very important for us to get right. Otherwise, there will be two and growing distinct levels of education: those that have access and have the right kit, the right digital availability to learn, and those that don't. And we can't be exacerbating that problem. We have to find a way to help solve it.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that at least at the university level, inclusive access is one program that McGraw Hill is using to lower the cost of materials. So it's a step in the right direction.
I love it. I honestly, to me, inclusive access is the most elegant solution to the higher education problem. It doesn't help so much in K-12. But when you think about the higher ed business and you imagine a scenario that's run through the institution, which inclusive access is always, it's owned by the faculty and often by the institution in a broader way. It will partner with instructors as they select, as they always should, what material they want to use and what they want to adopt. We'll partner with the bookstore entities that may be on campus if that's what the institution desires. So we can work with all stakeholders in a way that allows us to deliver the content, either standalone ebook form, your basic book type of material, or ideally utilizing Connect and all of the applications we have on Connect, particularly as we get into the assessment material and the ability to be adaptive in the way we're directing students. It's just a wonderful tool for us to use. And by law, we have to offer it at the best price. You know, that it is the most cost-effective way for instructors and institutions to adopt our product. And it's the best way to make sure students use the material on day one. They start it immediately. And it's the best way for faculty to know that every student has got the same material. Some are not using an old edition from 1973, you know, or they're not using something that is pirated, or they're not using, that they have something that the faculty can absolutely be assured that they're assigning material the students have the resources to use. It's a great system.
Also recently, I feel like there's been a lot of sentiment among students that their online education isn't equal to their in-person classes. So how would you say that online classes are equal to or even more valuable than in-person classes?
A lot of it depends upon the age and stage of the student. It also depends upon the discipline, I think, that they're studying. Clearly, if you're a med student, you're going to need access to real labs, not just virtual labs at some stage. That's a given. You know, part of the university education is the social, the dynamic way that you get a group together and you're able to critically think through issues. That's the benefit of lectures, and particularly then smaller group seminars that students engage with. And they engage with themselves in a way that just foments discussion, which is they're very important skills they must have. When it comes to the dissemination of educational material, we can do that at McGraw Hill through Connect and other platforms. Alex is another good example for math and chemistry. We can do that in a way that really helps the instructor. We never attempt to replace the instructor. That's never been our goal, never shall be our goal. What we attempt to do is enhance all of their teaching abilities, and by providing tools they can use just to help them in the transition. We're not trying to say that we will provide material that will mean that you will never need to be in a physical classroom again. That's not true. That's not our purpose. We just need to create material that gives that flexibility, and in a seamless way, you can move from teaching your students in a physical classroom, or you can move to teaching them directly online, and you really have no hiccups and no major problems along the way. You can still go through your semester course plan that you have. You can go through your assessment as you have designed, and you can go through all of the basic preparatory materials that you would do otherwise on campus. You can still create and then deliver online through our tools. We're just trying to make it easier for that transition to happen and to make it seamless.
So it's just more about like supporting like in-person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's supporting the instructor in the process. I once was on a flight with somebody on the way from LaGuardia to Houston, very quick digression. And after he's a senior guy, it turns out, with a Big Four consultancy company. I won't mention any names. And he, at the end of the flight to Houston, he said to me, as classic private equity guys do, so what are the two big things that's going to happen in education that will define the future of education? I said, that's really easy. I said, great teachers and great teaching. And he looked at me and said, well, but that's been the same for millennia. And I said, exactly. And it will be the same for another millennia. What we try and do at McGraw Hill is create the tools to help the great teaching happen and to give the tools to the great teacher so they can do the job that's required and engage the student to bring them on. We have no intention to try and replace that. We're just trying to enhance it. So great teaching and great teachers working with our material, that's what's going to benefit education.
So John, we're so excited and honored to be partnering with you. You are someone who has such a deep passion and commitment to education, which very much matches our own commitment to education. Today we're talking about equity. Why is that such a passion for you?
Well, for me personally, when I look back at my own education, I see how much of it was situational and how much of where I am today, the situation I'm in, was dependent on the things my mother did for me, was dependent on having a certain key few teachers who really saw some potential in me. If I was a student who didn't have a mother like the mother I had, if I didn't have a teacher who really saw potential in me, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today. And I know that there are brilliant children all across this country who their talents are being lost because they're born into maybe a community where the education system's not as strong. And that's a really sad reality when education feels like a basic right that someone should have. But in a lot of places, this still really isn't the case.
We believe this is a really exciting time in education right now. At McGraw Hill, we're at the forefront of technology solutions that can teach any student no matter what their starting point is. So we believe that all students are capable of high achievement if you give them the right resources.
I knew McGraw Hill really cared about educational equity just based off the systems that they've been employing, but it's been great to hear details from you about what you guys have done and what you'll continue to do in the future and why this is important.
Thank you, John. It's been great to talk to you as well. I think the work you're doing is really important. We're really committed to creating learning solutions that close the achievement gap for an enormous population of students, and we think technology has the power to really transform an individual's life.
Now, if we think past education and think of like a student's career, so the goal for a lot of engineering students is a career in industry. And there's this feeling that like, oh, this online homework is just simply busy work for students. So yeah, how do you think this prepares a student?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's, you know, how do you get into the student mindset? And we do actually attempt to get into the student mindset with the material that we create, particularly as we put material onto Connect. Part of our research is with students and understanding how they learn and watching how they learn, how much engagement they have, how much time we will have with them before their eyes go over here and they yawn and they do this and they get bored. We make sure that as we create our products, and as you think about SmartBook and other elements that we have within Connect, how do we keep their engagement? How do we keep their interest? How do we use keywords and pedagogy correctly to gauge and track their progress as they're going through specific areas? As an engineer, I'm not an engineer. I've never taken any engineering courses, but I would imagine, and business school is not that different. I would imagine in some ways, I would imagine that you view your online activity. Maybe initially it's different because you're being graded in a different way, but actually I think most students today see this as exactly the same as when they would do something on paper maybe in their grade school and pass it back in. We're just more efficient in how we do it. They get the answers straight back. They see that if they follow a path that we do with Connect, they're going to get a 20% higher grade if they follow the pedagogical designs that we've created. This is true of engineering students and biology students and English students. Makes no difference. We know that with using our tools as we've created them, their performance will improve. And I think students today, particularly the new cohort, they are, as many of them in high school have been used to doing a lot of virtual learning and online courses for certain subjects, particularly if they've done some AP courses, they're going to get more and more familiar as they come into university, and that is just going to increase. So I think they'll see the ability to learn virtually in exactly the same way for specific subject areas as they would have seen it in a traditional physical sense. That's not to say that there are certain subject areas that you really need a bigger group to be there physically to go through, and you get more from a class if you can do that. But there are certain ways of learning, and a lot of students prefer that chance to focus and learn individually at their own pace, and we can track their pace purely online. I think it's going to go, we'll see a significant acceptance, and it's already beginning to happen.
Yeah, and like, would you say it's more important to learn like really the process rather than like the end result?
Yeah, good point. It is the process. It's the process of acceptance that, you know, as sad as this pandemic most definitely is, it's forced the issue now to where the student must realize that the process requires a deep understanding and a deep familiarity with how you learn online. And it also therefore requires the instructor to accept that they now have to teach that way online, and they've got to somehow get the best out of their students by using that media, that mechanism, as indeed they have themselves as they find the right way to engage their students through it. But I think that process is now accelerated after the last 2 months.
Yeah, and I think that this can be a really difficult process. And I know that a lot of students have a lot of fears and anxiety of like whether they can succeed in their virtual classes. So what would you say to help like combat these fears from students and instructors?
Yeah, it's you know, you've got a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams or a WebEx page of 20 students in a classroom. How do you raise your hand to comment? How do you not get 15 of the 20 talking at exactly the same time? How do you try and make sure that you can lead the classroom in a way that you're bringing out the quiet student who is going to be even quieter when he or she is sitting on a laptop in their house somewhere? They're real challenges to work through now, and it's going to take some time for that to work through. But I think necessity is always a very useful way to people to progress. And I think there is now a real need for that to enable education to continue in as seamless way as possible now. There is a real need for students to accept, I need to get used to learning and participating in a classroom in a different way. And I need to find a way that I can hit my little flag that says, hey, I've got a question, or hey, I've got a point. I've got my chat box. So I can say, wait, let me say a quick question. So they're used to utilizing the tools that they have. It's a process. It's going to take some time. Some students will respond to it quicker than others. It's going to be tougher for the instructors to gauge that, bring out the engagement. That's still a problem in the physical classroom, you know, bringing out students that are quieter, dampening down those students that perhaps are a little bit verbose. That skill is still going to be needed online. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult initially to get used to how we navigate that carefully.
Yeah, and would you say like this pandemic has just accelerated a change that was eventually going to happen?
Oh man, acceleration is the word. I mean, we've gone into the stratosphere very quickly. And, you know, when we think about what we, again, from a higher ed point of view, you know, we were having 800% requests of our digital customer services teams. Then they dropped down to 600% after 4 weeks. You know, so we've continuously had massive requests of instructors or students to sometimes say, how do I log on? Basic stuff. In most cases now, it's far more involved. How do I get the best out of this particular Connect application that will help my students in X course or Y course? That is, you know, we're at 74% of our higher education business at the end of 2019 was digital. That's grown over the last 10 years from around 45%. In the next year, I think that 74 could be 84 or higher. And it may even get into the high 80s, 90 within 2 years because of the need now for digital delivery to give you the flexibility of teaching and learning. and the chance to make sure, again, you can have a seamless process. Because come the fall, there is no doubt in my mind that some universities are going to be going back in August. There's going to be a second wave of this virus. They're going to be sent back home in October. Let's hope they get to Thanksgiving, which is the plan with a lot of universities. They start in earlier August, they go through to Thanksgiving, and then keep students at home in December. Let's hope we can keep the virus at bay until Thanksgiving, so a second wave doesn't further disrupt the semester, but it could. The only way to deal with that is to get familiar with the students and the instructors using the technology to learn, and that's going to happen more and more and more. It's accelerated rapidly.
And then do you think that McGraw Hill is prepared for like the sudden shift if it does happen?
I'm really excited by the chance. We are more than prepared, and we're continuing to invest even more to make sure that we can help faculty move their courses online and students learn that way. And we're absolutely geared up for the fall, I can tell you. It's going to be very exciting.
It's great, and it's great that you don't let learning stop just because of like physical barriers.
No, absolutely. It continues, and ever shall it continue.
I think that was all my questions for now.
That's
but
great.
Thank you so much.
This has been fun, Naz. It was much more fun than my last meeting, I'm telling you.
Thank you, Naz and Simon, for that unique look into what students are wondering and what is happening at McGraw Hill in response to some of those questions.